Marneta Viegas is the founder of Relax Kids Ltd, a leading expert on children's relaxation. She's been running her relaxation program for the last 25 years, and it's helped over 5 million children at home and in school. Marneta has written 20 children's meditation books and has recorded over 500 meditation audios. She's developed a unique, award-winning 7-step method to teach children to self-regulate and manage their anxiety. Marneta's father died suddenly when she was 18, just before she went to university. I'm going to ask her about her relaxation program and for her tips on how, as parents, we can help teenagers learn to relax more. Marneta, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for reaching out because we have talked about anxiety quite a bit on the podcast. And usually that's with someone who has a personal experience of anxiety and is able to show young people that it's not the end of the world. There is a way through to the other side. And a couple of my guests actually have said you've got to see it to be it. And they meant women in tech or gay individuals who you can relate to. Those are the two specifics in recent episodes. But I think it's true with everything. So you can be a person with anxiety and make it through those really quite intensely anxious or anxiety-inducing teenage years. And be a successful adult, and it doesn't have to be the end of the world. It's just about coping strategies and how you approach what's going on in your life, I think, isn't it? But that's me. You're the expert. Tell me, how does that land with you?
Absolutely. Well, anxiety has not really been personally my thing. I wouldn't say that's my overriding thing. I would say low self-esteem has been my theme, if you like. I think we all come with one theme that we've picked up from our childhood. And I would say it would be more on the low self-esteem. And yeah, absolutely, it would come from teenage, but beyond. Definitely rooted in early childhood.
You're speaking my language. I'm constantly working on self-esteem, and I've come a long way, but yeah, God, my teenage years, probably I was already struggling with self-esteem without knowing it. And my teenage years just made it even worse.
I would say crippling. You know, when people say crippling anxiety or crippling self-esteem, I would say that would be the right word. I remember being at uni, I went to performing arts school. So I must have been good enough to get into, I did the full on in the 80s fame school. I went to performing arts college, full on dancing on tables. And then I went to university to do a performing arts degree. Right. And it was very, very, not many of these at the time. So you had to be good to get in. But every single lunch hour, I would be in a piano room. There'd be a whole load of piano rooms and you'd go alone to practice. And I would just be in floods of tears, feeling the worst there, thinking I need to leave. Everyone's so talented. What am I doing here? Yeah.
Wow. Gosh. I mean, that's not what I was planning to ask you about next. Let's go there, because I remember watching Fame as a kid in the 80s. It was not a film, guys. It was what you'd call a box set these days, but it was a weekly show with these really crazy, wacky, talented young American kids teenagers, young adults who did all this dancing on tables and a bit like High School Musical. And I remember thinking they were the coolest thing, but I can't actually remember whether any of them had crippling anxiety and self-esteem. You imagine those people have got all of the confidence, but that wasn't so for you.
No. And I mean, I think if you interview a lot of very famous celebrities, even underneath, you scratch beneath that surface, there is crippling anxiety. I think even the highest you go, the more the anxiety and the feelings of low self-esteem can be there. because in that world, you are only as good as your last job. This constantly, especially now when you up and coming young stars, to remain on that level must be so incredible. And I think it's like we need to turn this whole thing on its head, that we are a success in our own right, and it doesn't have to be with and on some sort of scale with other people.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And comparison syndrome gets talked about a lot online these days. And it's been going on for centuries, I reckon, comparing ourselves to people that we think are more successful, prettier, cooler, more popular, cleverer than we are. And there's definitely something about learning to be absolutely fine with exactly who you are. But I wonder how we do that. I'm going to get you're going to help us understand that, I'm hoping, as we go through talking about relaxing. I'm imagining relaxing into our own skins as being part of it. Marneta, can we talk about your teenage years a little bit before you went to university? What life was like for you growing up?
Yeah, so I think there was like a double-sided thing. On the outside, everything seemed fine. Definitely teenage years. I was very, very privileged. My parents, they really worked very, very hard to send me to private school. And so my father, bless him, he was not well. He was much older than my mother. So, he had 2 heart attacks, one when I was little, and then one before I was born, actually, and then one when I was little. And so he lost his job with the government, with the British Embassy. We were meant to go to Brazil. We'd been in Iran. And so he couldn't find a job. So he was working for people in care homes, and he did art. And so you could just feel his, his own self-esteem. And I'm sure I picked it up. So they worked so hard, and I went to private school. And again, I just didn't feel good enough, and I wasn't good enough for him. My maths wasn't good enough for him. My English, my O-levels, I came out with great O-levels, but it wasn't straight A's.
Right.
So I think that's where it was, this constantly feeling I just was not good enough, because, my father's put everything on the line for me to be maybe a doctor, because he came from an Indian background. So that's what the immigrant Indians would do. Their children, they'd put them in private school, and they'd be doctors or dentists. My mother was English, so she came from farming background. So a very interesting, mix at the time in the 60s and then 70s. So of course in the 70s there was bullying, racial issues, because I was one of the only dark-skinned girls in a very white, middle class, upper class, school. And so there was that. Also, to add to that, my mother was quite spiritual. And so we were vegetarian, not my father, but my mother. So she almost embraced more of the Indian things, whereas my father was desperately trying to be English.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And she was going the other way. And so I think I've been this sort of like really, I've actually not known where I am. Just as I've spoken to you there, I've known about this, but that Caduceus thing of the snakes, the push and pull. And so this has been an inner struggle with my own self. I sound very English, but I look very Indian. And so, so the bullying, and I was going to say being a vegetarian in the 70s and 80s. Oh my goodness. They literally just picked up the meat from my plate and handed it. That was being a vegetarian. I'll take the ham off. And so
here's the vegetables. Yeah, no fun at all.
So all these things, I think, contributed to, just not looking like I so wanted to look. I had a friend, and this is ridiculous. She had an Indian father, English mother, and she had alabaster white skin and dark hair, and she looked English. And I just thought, why can't I look like her? And this constantly trying to whiten my skin, with incredible, isn't it? And so, and like now, and this is before social media. Can you imagine what that must have been like if you could see in front of you? If I was on Instagram seeing all these beautiful girls and,
Yeah. We've got an episode way back in the early first or second season of the podcast with a lady talking about what it was like to be biracial as well, because she similarly had a white mother and a black father, and she said that's even worse in some ways than being subjected to racism as a black person or a brown person. That's even worse because you don't know who to ally yourself with. And so you talking there about your identity being quite confused. I imagine that played a part as well. But then, vegetarian in the 70s wasn't a thing. And your dad was doing a totally different thing and had a different goal for you than your mum. That must be linked with self-esteem, not having self-identity clearly marked for you.
Yeah. And I just remember an overriding thing, and I'm sure parents will hear this, that I remember slamming the door going, nobody understands me. And if the door didn't slam properly because it was a funny door, I'd have to go back and slam it again.
Right, yeah.
Like, nobody understands me.
Yeah.
So, which is
a famous teenage phrase anyway. No teenager ever felt like they were understood. I'm convinced of it. But it must have been even more tricky for you with confusing identity things going on and different aspirations for you from your parents.
And definitely with my mother taking on a very spiritual, getting into yoga and spirituality. So she became, she was quite, to my friends, she became a bit strange.
Yeah. Oh God, you really don't want your parents to be different. We don't want anything about you to be different. It's just even more embarrassing than having a parent in the first place when you're young.
Some of the things that she would come up with in front, I'd take friends home and you just want to die, over the top, sort of this spiritual stuff. Oh dear.
Yeah. Oh, well done for you for taking them home. I just didn't bother. Oh gosh, Marneta, I understand why relaxation has become such an important deal for you, and we'll get onto that. But can you tell us a little bit about what happened to your dad and how things felt for you when he died?
Yeah. So I was 18, and I remember sitting at the breakfast. We had breakfast together. Then I wanted to go into town to go to the Laura Ashley sale. And so he dropped me off, and I remember this moment, looking back, thinking, you look tired. There was something. And then on the way home, he had a heart attack in his car. He crashed with a van outside his Catholic church. So his priest actually came out. So it's amazing, but I didn't know. And so I was there happily shopping in Laura Ashley, spending the afternoon or however long, came home, and my younger sister, Maria, who was 15, and my mum, they were white, and they said, Dad has passed away. And I just sort of froze. And my immediate feeling was guilt that my little sister, who she was definitely Daddy's girl, she had to go to the mortuary to identify and do all that.
Oh,
and
wow.
So it was like a frozen and guilt. And I think I held on to that guilt for a very, very, very long time. Yeah. Yeah. And again, it sounds strange, but at the funeral, because my mum was into a spiritual faith, she'd said not to cry. I remember being in the hearse, and she said, don't cry. His soul it's all about the soul and all that sort of stuff. And I did the reading. at the funeral, and the funeral was incredible because they had 5 coach loads of, at the time you'd call them handicapped. Now because that was the 80s, now it would be special needs. because it was the daycare for the handicapped, and they were all in there. So that room was so full of all those people sending, that love, this man who'd given his time to help them through art. But, he still felt, I know he felt, he didn't achieve in his life what he wanted to. But for me, it was frozen. So I never cried. I didn't mourn a loss for my father. Yeah. And I think later on that catches up with you. Maybe when you lose somebody else or, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
and then I went to uni.
Yeah. I want to talk about that. Well, I'm just thinking about not being able to mourn, not being able to cry, feeling like you weren't allowed to cry.
Possibly. But then I think it was just sort of like I can't put that onto anybody else, because I think there was a shutting down.
Yes.
Because that's another method, isn't it? Of complete shutting down.
Yes.
And moving on.
Mm-hmm. Shutting down, distracting, denying. It's part and parcel of the phases of grief, but you have to grieve healthily. You have to move on from that. And so many people, especially back then, I'm really hoping it's different now, but so many people in my age bracket really don't want to feel their feelings.
No.
And bereavement is in another world. I'm a counsellor, and bereavement's one of my specialisms. And people are, especially in the UK, Western world, I guess, are so conditioned to not being allowed to show their grief, whether that's been put on them by someone else or whether it's an expectation they've built up of themselves through childhood, because we all used to get told, don't cry, it's fine. Or we were distracted as a child from crying with a fizzy drink or a lollipop or something. And so that's where we learn to eat our feelings, drink our feelings, squash our feelings. And what I've learned is that our feelings don't ever go away, and we don't process them if we keep squashing them, swallowing them, hiding them. We have to be allowed to be with our feelings.
Absolutely. And as you're speaking, that's one thing my father and many men, especially at that time, didn't show his feelings. I don't think he really was able to show how much he loved me. Putting me in an expensive school was as far as that was. But I remember distinctly being on stage. I was in a young people's opera company, and I usually had the lead. And I remember him being on the front row, and I was singing away, and I looked down, and he had his hand over his mouth, and it was like he was squashing his pride. It's like he didn't want to show how happy and proud he was. In Relax Kids and Charge Up for Teens, this is why I really stress the affirmation part of it, because children need to hear these words of affirmation, the positive words, as much as possible. Because even if we don't feel it, as long as it's going in, we are sponges. And particularly it needs to start from a younger age.
Yeah, no, that's true. And you're right, actually, affirmations. Yeah, I'm thinking of the cliched phrase, fake it till you make it. It actually is true. In counselling, we call it act as if. So my therapist will often say to me, why don't you just try acting as if you love yourself? I'm like, oh, yeah, that's right. And you act as if you love yourself until you genuinely notice that you love yourself.
Yeah.
And it works.
But also words have a vibration to them. So when we say, I hate,
Uh-huh.
it's like, that's why it's called spelling. It's called spelling because it is spelling. It's like we're putting spells into the atmosphere, if you know what I mean.
Right.
And this is very woo-woo, but it has been scientifically researched.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know whether Dr. David Hamilton has looked into this aspect. He's looked into, I think so, because I think he's written a book called Why Woo-Woo Works or something.
Right.
I mean, he gets all the research of all this spiritual stuff. But yeah, so in terms of, we're sending out spells into the world. So if we send out the spell of I love myself, even if we don't feel it, but very often I myself will be sending out the spell, oh, I hate this about myself. Oh, I'm no good at this. And so of course it's going to come back. It's what we send out comes back to us. And I think this comes very much in parenting. It's like, our inner frustrations, what we're sending out verbally, but also through our like a transistor radio. We pick up on each other's energies. And so when we're in a state of stress, our children, our teens will pick that up. When we're hating things, they will pick that up. And we sort of like energize, what's the word? Synergy between each other. So if one person's sending this out, then they'll pick up, and that's how it works. Because our nervous systems are talking to each other, even if we don't say anything.
Oh, no, that's true. I mean, that's why we get a sense and an instinct around someone or something, isn't it? Our bodies know before our minds know.
Absolutely. So going back to your fake it till you make it, act as if. So, I will act as if I love myself and then say those words.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about what you said about not having been, about it coming back to bite you. That wasn't your words, but that's what I interpreted. You didn't mourn at the time when your dad died and it came back to haunt you. That must have been a really difficult time to be leaving home when something so catastrophic and fundamental had happened in the family. How did you approach that, and what happened for you when you went to university?
I think I literally just shut the door to home.
Right.
I don't think I even went back.
Right.
I might have gone back once for Christmas, but then I didn't go back. I made my new life. And I became super independent. I didn't ask my mother for anything. From that age, I made my own money. We were very lucky in those days. We had grants.
We did.
So we had, was it £2,000?
It wasn't a lot, but it was a lot more than they get now.
And then, our, my rent was paid, and I got little jobs here and there, cleaning or working for the theatre. So I was fine and I was independent, but I wasn't happy. And I felt very at sea and very alone. I went to the Welsh College of Music and Drama for 1 year. And so I studied music for teaching. But then after 1 year, I left and I got into a performing arts school in Middlesex University. And in both places, I just wasn't able to connect with anyone. So now, as I say it, that lack of losing that main connection almost broke off many connections, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And yeah. I'm thinking about the fact that you said you shut everything down, you became independent. So I imagine you closing yourself off to connections.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just, I'm saying it, I'm thinking about, teenagers who really have really struggled with home, and, and then they leave and they become so independent.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, we'll just fend for ourselves no matter what.
Yeah. And actually, and it's applauded, isn't it? Schools talk about it in terms of resilience. Like, yes. Can you get over this friendship issue, this knee scrape on the playground? Can you just, but it is, I'm hesitant to say it because resilience is a quality that we need in life. But there is an element, if we take it too far, of denying the fact that it really hurts and you feel sad for yourself when you've scraped your knee on the playground, and you should be allowed a moment to cry.
Yes.
And I think it's getting better now, but we as parents, I didn't raise my kids to show their feelings because it's not how I was raised, but I regret it so much now. yeah, independence is applauded, but actually there's a dark side to independence that means people often don't have those connections.
And the dark side also will be that everything gets turned on yourself. So you're the one doing all the work. I was the one out there surviving, but it's just me against that. It becomes you against the world, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. And then everything's a battle. And where's the time for self and relaxation? And there we have segued right into what we came to talk about. So where did things shift for you? When did you start to think about relaxation being important?
So I left university and then I went I never interviewed for a job. And I started a business entertaining children. And over 10 years, I noticed a change in their behavior. They just weren't sitting still. They weren't listening. They weren't concentrating. They were more hyper. And this is in the early 90s to the end of the 90s. And I thought they need to meditate. Having learnt from my mother from when I was 12, I thought, I wonder if we need to do meditation. And I started researching. Very hard to research at those times because we didn't have the internet as we do now. And I couldn't find anything meditation for children or relaxation for children. So I thought I'm going to start something. And I needed to find a way to make it accessible to children and acceptable to adults. So it's not woo-woo and weird and lentil, 70s, 80s sort of weird.
Yeah, well, I'm going to bring you on to how to get teenagers to relate to all that, because teenagers are notoriously distrustful of anything that they don't already know. So
totally. Well, I
carry on. I interrupted you.
No. And so I had the idea of turning all the fairy stories into relaxations, because every year I would put on a children's theatre show, taking a fairy story and bringing out all the values from the fairy story. And so I thought, and it worked with all the fairy stories apart from Little Red Riding Hood, because the wolf was always there. I got this book published, and then I started these classes alongside the books coming out and making CDs. And that's how I sort of tumbled into setting up Relax Kids, just by thinking, we need to do something for children. And then as those didn't have anything for teens, because teens were not my area. I always worked with little ones. But as those little ones started growing up and becoming teens, I had to develop new things for teens. And so I developed a charge up program. And this was the idea of charging up your inner battery, because they're always on their phones, and then getting them to understand that their phones run out of batteries. And just as your phone runs out of battery, so you run out. You can't just be, unplugged all the time. You need to plug back in.
Yes, I love that analogy, and it works for young people.
It does. And all the positive thinking around that. And it really, I created it with a friend of mine, Anna, who was a senior social worker, and she was working with teens all the time. And they just loved it. And teens will come in going, what's this? And walking out saying, I get it. I get it.
Amazing.
And one of my coaches, because I train, to run Relax Kids classes. You can be a Relax Kids coach or charge up coach. And this is amazing. She's up in the north, and there's so much knife crime, in her area. And she's working with the police doing charge up, but also with the youth justice system. They funded her till the end of 2025 to work with teens to help support them, against all this crime and knife crime. And it's just it's changing lives.
If you've got a link to that, I'll put it in the show notes, because it's interesting to learn more about that. We've got an episode on knife crime that I recorded with a young lady who was 17 at the time when we recorded, and she was doing similar kind of outreach work in Newham, the borough of London, because there was a lot of knife crime and gang culture. It's fascinating, and they don't, I feel so frustrated because I feel like young people, young adults, teenagers, they just need attention and time and love, and they've lost so much of that. Oh, but we're going to get into politics if I carry on.
Although what is it? They need attention, affection, and affirmation. Those three things: attention, affection, and affirmation. At least start with the attention, because the affection can often, be shrugged off.
Yeah.
But attention as much as possible.
Yeah, take them seriously.
Affirmation.
Yeah. So Charge Up Teens, that's the teenage program. Tell me, how does that differ from the children's program, and what sort of things you do? Attention, affection, and affirmation, I guess. So tell us what you do.
Okay, so the whole concept behind the Relax Kids program, what makes it unique, that I set up 1999, was there are 7 steps to relaxing. And we start with movement. So we get rid of all their energy and they move their body. Then they play some social games. Then they stretch based on simple yoga stretches. They massage each other or themselves. They breathe, deep breathing, which really starts to calm the nervous system down. They say their affirmations, and then they lie down on the floor and they do their visualizations or meditation. Now, and the reason why this works is because we're working through their natural energy system, going through the body, up into the heart and into the head. And it's only 2 years after creating this system in this order, can't move the order around, won't work, that I realized, and let's go back to the woo-woo, that it works with the chakra system. Amazing. So the movement is red, which is that feeling grounded and getting into your body. Then we move to play, which is all the creative or sexual energy, but it's the same thing. It's that creativity energy. Then we go to stretching, which is the solar plexus energy, which is here in the solar plexus, which is about balance. And then we go to massage, which is heart, giving, touching, sending it out through your arms. Then breathing, the throat chakra, affirmations into the third eye chakra, into the crown chakra. So we've worked all the way through the body. And that's why in half an hour, 20 minutes, 45 minutes, we can get even little ones to teens getting it and lying down and often falling asleep.
Yeah. And is the theory that they can take that away and recreate it for themselves at home?
Absolutely. Yes.
So it's a skill that they're learning.
Yes.
It's not a,
and then
it's not like having a massage. Like, I always complain that I go for a massage and I need another one a week later. So it never cures me, but I'm imagining that these kids can take this home and use it as a resource for themselves.
Absolutely. And we've had children learn it, going off into their bedroom and well, with the little ones, having all the teddies round and doing a Relax Kids class with the teddies, or sitting on their bed and going through their breathing on themselves. And so we're giving them these tools, these techniques. It's a toolkit for life. And particularly with the Charge Up program, when Anna did I did the exercises for the 7 steps, and Anna wrote the lesson plans. And she said, this is a handbook that every teen should have, because it covers boundaries, art of consent, relationships, being positive, covers the brain, how your brain works, how your body works, everything. So it is, and then they have all the tools, as well as that understanding, as well as the analogy of the Charge Up, the phone.
I'm just, that's a very cute picture of kids playing with their teddies and taking them through the program, and kids learn through play. So I can see completely how that works. How do you get through to teenagers who are a little bit less playful and a little bit less trusting than young children?
I guess it's just meeting them where they are at, finding the ways in from things that they enjoy already,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe starting with 1 or 2 exercises and just drip feeding. I'm just thinking about, I wrote a book for teens. It was called The Imaginarium, or it is called The Imaginarium. And it's this concept that our brain has got lots of corridors, and then it leads to, I think there are, let's say 20, I think it's 25 doors. And in each door, there's a chamber, and each chamber will sort out any problem that you have. So, for example, if you're feeling anxious, you go to the chamber of relaxation. If you're feeling unsure or confused, you go to the chamber of solutions. And in each chamber, the meditation is it, and they're all very technological, if I've got the word right. So they're in their mind, they're right swiping, left swiping thoughts. You know, they've got like a chair and they've got buttons. So I've sort of met them where they are at.
Right.
Rather than, you know, with the little ones, it's like, let's float on boats, let's go up in clouds. Well, teens are not, that's just like, whereas they can imagine, they can, you know, see themselves in sort of like almost
a games console, I'm thinking.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm seeing one of those chairs with the buttons, and like, and each room will be slightly different. So that's the sort of thing.
Oh, you're making it sound like an escape room. My kids would love that.
Oh, yeah. And actually, at the beginning of the book, if I think about it, it does look like an escape room. I've listed every single problem that a teen could potentially have.
Okay.
And then which chamber to go to.
Okay.
So it does look like an escape room.
Yeah, so it makes logical academic sense as well, which is what they're used to being in school.
Yes.
Right. And where's the solution? Interesting. And what would you say for parents who know that they've got a teenager who finds it hard to relax? How can we help our own children, our own young adults, to develop some easier routes to access relaxation?
I would say, I would ask the parent first, are you relaxed?
Okay. Right. So your next course is going to be for adults, right? For parents. Yeah.
Well, if you think, they always say there's no such thing as a bad dog, it's a bad owner. I'm not saying parents are bad, but it's like, and I know for my dog is, I have a little rescue terrier who's very anxious, and, you know, I haven't learned how to, you know, manage my own. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, but when I am in a state of calm, he becomes calm. So because our nervous systems, going back to that, you know, we're talking all the time. So we cannot say my teen needs to relax until, have I fully relaxed? Have I got a program of meditation? Have I downloaded a Calm or an Insight app? Am I daily doing my meditation?
Yeah, and do I make time for myself?
Do I make time for myself?
That's my issue.
You know, do I say those affirmations for myself?
Yeah.
You know, so let's just it's like, you know, they say this thing where you pointing a finger at someone. Well, how many fingers are pointing back at you? You know, you're not relaxed. Well, yeah, well, it's like it's like, get the mirror back. I am not relaxed. And that's like full on taking responsibility, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and it's quite hard.
It's very hard.
I want to point out that for parents, it can be quite hard to relax, because when we're worried about our kids,
absolutely,
it's really difficult to separate our own well-being from theirs, particularly because, well, they were part of us, especially mothers. And it's been our instinct to make everything all right for them since the minute they were conceived. So, and it is part and parcel of growing an independent adult and developing a good adult relationship with your child. But it's that I think the hardest part of parenting is being able to separate our own feelings from their feelings and step away and let them live their own lives. So I just want to put that in there, that it's not as easy as it sounds.
I'm absolutely with you.
But it's a very good point.
Well, yeah. And even if it's like just a short time, like a minute here and a minute there, like, we'll reach for a snack and it's like, we'll eat a little snack. We'll have a little snack relax, moment. Just stop, go outside, if it's sunny, for one moment with a cup of tea and stand at the door and breathe, or just placing your hand. One nice one is one hand here, another at the base of the head.
Marneta's got one hand on her forehead and one on the back of her skull.
Yeah,
at the back of her neck.
Yeah, at the back of the skull, sort of near the bottom of the neck. And that's just instantly relaxing.
Quite grounding.
Just placing grounding. Going outside if you can, feet on the grass. That's really super grounding and relaxing. Stopping. I think also we've been through a whole wave of mindfulness. I find mindfulness in the whole entirety quite boring and quite hard for us, because it's sort of...
I love that you say that. Boring is brilliant. So I know loads of people who say that mindfulness is hard. And I've learned to be pretty mindful, but it's taken me a lot of effort, and it shouldn't. And the effort has been in stopping myself from making it effortful, because I call myself a recovering perfectionist. So when things come into my head, I'm going, I need to have my head emptied, get it out, get all that out. That's actually not the point, is it?
No.
Mindfulness is just about noticing where you are in your body and in your head at any time, and not following your worries down particular avenues, just letting them. Someone described it to me once as every thought that pops into your head when you're meditating needs to look like a cloud, and clouds just drift across the sky and disappear off to the periphery, and you let them go. You don't try and hold on to them. And that was probably the best trick I ever got from meditating. But you've just told me mindfulness is boring, and I love that.
I always think for children, trying to sort of like really be that real sort of still, and for me, I just go through with the creativity. And give them something, rather than be focusing on your thoughts or seeing them, not seeing. Let's just sort of like focus on clouds, or focus on our internal gaming. Make it a little bit more inspiring. But that's for me. Other people may, like the more simple way. I just like the more creative way.
It depends what switches you on. So I think probably my first experience of mindfulness, without even knowing it at the time, was when I went on a skiing holiday. And I've heard other people say this, that when you're skiing, that is more of a headrest than it is when you're lying on a beach. So it's a physically demanding holiday, but because you're spending 80% of your daylight hours trying to stay safe and alive and on your feet, you can't think about the deadline that's waiting at home or the conversation you had with your boss. And my kids love skiing, and I do think that is really their only mindfulness.
Absolutely. I was just thinking on the topic of sort of mindfulness, I wrote this tiny little book, and it's called Power Up. And it's basically a HIIT program for the mind. So high interval intensive training. Mm-hmm. So there are some exercises, and you just do them for a few seconds, and then you repeat them. So you just imagine this, you imagine that, imagine it. And that's another way in. Yeah, high intense, because I wanted to, that was for teens, because I wanted to try and find a different way to get, because teens are often, the older teens can be all about the gym and high interval intensive
true.
exercise for.
Yes.
And so I thought, well, let's go in with that. So going with the gaming, going with the computer, going with the gym analogies. And it's just, again, it's meeting them. You asked me, how do we get to them? Well, first myself, and then go in with an angle that they would relate to.
Yes.
Yeah. Whether it's the gym or the phone. I would say those two big things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nature, unfortunately, I don't know. I can't speak, but I remember as a teen, even going to uni, my university was in the most beautiful place. I didn't even notice the trees. We had a lake. I don't think I even went to the lake. And then in Wales, in Cardiff, it was beautiful. I never went to the river. I cannot believe. And so I don't think teens necessarily, I mean, maybe it's changed now. We're not so in touch with nature.
No, I think that's true. Or we're just not aware of it, because when I was young, I remember walking the dog regularly with my mum. We had a set of fields nearby. And I can remember summer evenings when it had been a hot day, we'd walk the dog in the evening. I can remember really enjoying the colour of the grass and the sky and the smell of the summer evening. But at the time, I don't think I was particularly focused on it. So I do think there is an age thing. And I often tell this story because it makes me laugh now. We went on a holiday once to Spain, and my parents felt like to me, I was 15. It felt like to me that my parents spent the entire week talking about bougainvillea and how beautiful bougainvillea was, because we didn't have any near us and there was loads of it in Spain. And I now catch myself walking around on holiday with my kids going, God, look at the colour of that bougainvillea. So funny. There's a time for everything. And maybe when you're 15 is not the time for relating to nature.
But as you're speaking, I'm just thinking, my little sister, she went on to be a firefighter, and she will not meditate. She will not relax. Gardening is her relaxation. And she said, if I have to sit and meditate, it stresses me out, she says. So that's interesting, isn't it?
Yes.
So it might be, listening to some music is a way in. And actually the silence, because for some minds, when there's so much going on, if you're faced with that, that dome of noise inside, it's too stressing.
Silence is too difficult.
Yeah. So maybe some music, or I'm thinking you can get these lovely coloured lights where you've got these laser things, and just like something like that, rather than, especially if it's forced upon. You won't get any result.
No.
So first with themselves, and then meet them where they're at and find nice ways in. Maybe try being in nature.
Well, it's try everything, isn't it? And I'm thinking about my daughter, probably her biggest relaxation. She's a complete bookworm, and she gets very absorbed when she's reading. So I doubt she thinks about much else other than what book she's reading. And yeah, music will be a big one. It was for me. I remember lying on my carpet with my record player, getting lost in the music that I enjoyed. So that is a form of mindfulness, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's just whichever way in.
Really interesting, and a completely different sort of take. I'm always looking for practical tips for parents. Or do this, it's going to help your child. But actually, this is, something of a reframe in terms of be okay yourself and find other angles. And what you're really talking about, and we're kind of doing a complete circle here, is connection and finding ways of mutually relating to each other. And that's going to help with mood and relaxation and good vibes. God, I can't believe I said that word. My kids will kill me for that. Kill me, hate me. My kids will hate me for using the word vibes in public.
Do they listen to your podcasts?
No. I don't know why I'm worried. Of course they don't. Oh, it's been really nice talking to you, Marneta.
Yeah,
Thank
you
you.
too. Thank you.
A really good insight. And where can people find you if they want to find out more about what you do?
Yeah, go to relaxkids.com, the website, nice and simple. And yeah, there's the information about the Charge Up. And then if you go to the shop, those books, The Imaginarium, Power Up, and there are some MP3s. Relax and De-Stress is a great one for teens. And there are some emotion ones if you've got anger issues. There's one on self-esteem. There's one on anxiety.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Oh, I think I'm not sure I want to pass those on to my kids. I need them myself. I'm going to go and do that this weekend.
Yeah, brilliant.
Thank you so much, Marneta. It was lovely chatting to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. I really do appreciate it. Thank you too to everyone who's already rated and reviewed the podcast. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Amazon, it would mean the world to me if you could leave a review. It really helps get the word out, as well as making me very happy to read what you have to say. If this episode strikes a chord for you, please share it with anyone else you know who might be in the same boat, and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. If you have a story or a suggestion for something you'd like to see covered on the podcast, you can email me at teenagekickspodcast@gmail.com or message me on Instagram. I am Helen Woods. I love hearing from all my listeners. It really makes a difference to me on this journey. See you next week when I'll be chatting to another brilliant guest about the highs and lows of parenting teens. Bye for now.